All right, I'm now joined by Forrest Miller, who is the producer for this show, and also for the Katie Halper show, uh, the Michael Brooks show originally, and
Les Mills on Demand, the ultimate fitness app.
Sounds like you got something on there.
Greatest workouts.
I don't have anything on that I know of.
Worldwide.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, there it is. All right.
There we go. All right.
It was a commercial that was going on apparently during this live stream.
Fair enough. Well, you can tell that that Forrest is a producer, very very on top of all this. But no, he is very good at all of that. But he is also now expanding into stuff like this. So he's doing you're going to be doing a segment or a regular thing, or how's this going to work for Cole James Cash?
I'm not exactly sure yet, but I'm a film contributor, so I assume there's going to be just like a monthly segment. I think he has 20 of them, including Jamie Peck and like a couple other people that like that are fairly big on Twitter that he's been and through like majority report and stuff. We haven't really talked specifics about how exactly his show is going to work, but I know that on the 23rd, from doing it like once a week to 3 to 5 times a week. So I assume we're all going to be on there a lot.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, obviously, happy for Cole, who has been a guest here before, that he's doing the show, and yeah, that's great that you're doing that. And I want to, and so because I've been trying to do more cultural content on here, and I was excited. I found out you're going to be doing that, so asked if you could do. You could do some movie streams for me, and you had this idea of doing this series about Scorcese. Since I think Goodfellas might have felt like a more natural, starting point, since that's one that more people know, I think, or there's a sort of like contrarian hot take that some people have that Casino is better. I don't know if you're one of those or not, but.
I think they're good in different ways. For me, like, I don't know. I kind of have to rewatch all the Scorsese movies because it's all kind of like a Scorsese soup in my mind. I feel like there's like scenes. Well, there's like scenes in Casino that I remember seeing like as a kid that I don't know why the fuck I was watching it as a kid, but apparently I was. That are just like so ingrained in my mind. Like like when Sharon Stone and Joe Pesci are in the trailer. And she finally like hooks up with him, and the head goes down. I remember seeing that as like a little kid, and
what's going on there?
and then not remembering which Scorsese movie it was, and it's just like a primordial mafia soup in my head. So I'm happy to watch all of them again.
Yeah, I can see that, right? I mean, definitely, like as different as they are. I think definitely this one and Goodfellas and even in a weird way, kind of The Irishman. Like I think that some of the mafia stuff in those 3 movies is like the atmosphere is very similar for some of those scenes. Like the scene. By the way, I should say before we go any further, just so everybody's clear. We are going to spoil the shit out of this 25-year-old movie.
Yeah.
We're going to talk in detail about everything.
You've only seen the first 90 minutes. You should turn it off and watch the second 90 minutes.
Yeah, well, when I used to watch it, I think I mentioned to you when we were texting about this that I've probably seen this movie, dozens of times, my early 20s. Although when I rewatched it last night, to prepare for this stream, it was the first time, God knows, like 15 years or something that I've watched it. So it's a really weird combination of it being fresh, but also like every single beat in that movie is like, oh yeah, remember that, I remember that, I remember that. But when I used to watch it, was a VHS, and it was one of those VHSs that like it was the 2-tape VHS. So I think I actually remember about, where the 90-minute mark was, because the first one ended, which is when he, which is when the guy who's on the gaming commission uses an anti-Semitic slur and says, we're going to kick him out of town.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the first VHS ended in the two VHS thing. But I was just going to say, right? Like
did you the link I texted you of the
yes.
actual,
I did. We will get to that. We'll show that in the stream. That was a really good find. I had no idea that that's what that was based on.
Young Harry Reid looks like James Woods, and I wouldn't have. He looks like James Woods playing Harry Reid.
Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, so I think Goodfellas, in some ways might have felt like a more natural starting point. But what I had Mike Racine on the main show a couple episodes ago, we got into a little Goodfellas stuff there. So we'll put a few weeks between that and whatever Goodfellas stream we do. But Goodfellas stream is coming for sure. And
we don't take the way out here give them an argument either. We don't go for what's easy. We go for.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I would say I don't quite go as far as going, I think probably if I had to pick, I think I like Goodfellas even more than this. The two movies there are some real deep similarities, we can get into. I was really thinking about that when I was watching it last night. But yeah, let's start this out, right? So for anybody who is watching this and hasn't seen Casino but doesn't mind the fact that we are going to thoroughly spoil the movie in what follows. So this is this is set in Las Vegas in the glory days, when there was much more open organized crime involvement. And so the main characters are Sam Ace Rothstein and Nikki Santorum. So let's start us out here, ground us in who these people are and what the movie's about.
All right, so Robert De Niro's Ace Rosenthal, or Ace. His character is based on Frank Rosenthal, who's a real casino manager / mobster, and he's a Jewish mob affiliate who's working with the Italian mob for a boss named Remo, who's like the Kansas City boss. Which this is all, I guess, grounded in fact of what really was happening with Frank Rosenthal at the time. But he was I don't think they ever really say where they're originally from. They say back in the day, back home. I don't know.
Yeah, they literally on the screen say back home in the day, right? So they keep it extremely vague.
Yeah, but he's best friends growing up with Nicky Santoro, who's also based on a real gangster, who's a made man in the mob, who's Italian. And
I think I actually just heard his name. It's Nicky Santorum, but I was getting Nicky Santora and Rick Santorum confused. But yeah, Nicky Santora, yeah.
It's kind of almost like we were talking about, or on the show you guys were talking about meritocracy the other day, and somehow Ace has turned himself into the world's best sports bettor. So he's extremely valuable to the mob, even more valuable than made men to the mob, because he can he's researched everything to do with sports betting so much that he can place the bets for the mobsters and basically, win them shitloads of money. And in real life, it's actually a real fact too that he was the first person to put a sports betting center in an actual casino. He did it in the Stardust Casino in real life. So basically, they've given him the Tangiers Hotel, which is one of the big hotels in, I guess, Scorcese universe in Las Vegas, and it's based on the Stardust Hotel, which is an actual casino, and that's kind of where the movie starts out.
Yeah, so he's been given this hotel, and he's not going to run it as the official chairman of the board, or anything that any sort of position that sounds like he'd be the main guy running the casino, because he has this criminal past as as a sports bookie and and gambler, and he was busted for that a bunch of times back home, whatever that means.
Yeah, and wherever that is.
Yeah. So, we do establish that the mob bosses, that they at least there's like an outpost in Kansas City that they say is the closest they can get to Vegas, without getting busted. So that's where they go to like meet people from Vegas.
And Vegas appears to be somewhat strict about, at least in this, about who they allow to come to the city and who they allow in casinos. And obviously that has its own level of corruption to it. But yeah, there's feds crawling everywhere throughout the city and throughout the casinos and keeping track of everything.
Yeah. So Kansas City is where there's like a storefront. We're in the back. You see sometimes the mob bosses meeting, and they do like they meet there and have various emissaries from the two guys we just mentioned, A. Rothstein, who's sort of the main protagonist, and the secondary protagonist, Nick Santoro. They who both have voiceovers in the movie, which is a couple other characters, like at least one other character does at one point briefly, but mainly
Frank Vincent's character,
Billy Leotardo.
Yeah, he shows up randomly at one point and breaks into the omnipresent narration.
Yeah. So, but mostly it's those two guys narrating. So when emissaries from one or the other of them, go to meet with the bosses to talk about what's going on, or to drop off their little suitcases of cash, then that's where they meet. They've also got one of the mob bosses. They sort of throw in this detail about one of the mob bosses made his mother like come to the storefront to like make Italian food for them in the back, and I believe that's worked in as a cameo for Scorsese's mother.
Yeah, and his father's in there too at one point as the father of the guy. They're both kind of in there back and forth for a second in the beginning of it, but
okay. Yeah, that I didn't know. His mother I recognize because I remember that also from Goodfellas. She's the mother of Pesci's character there.
Yeah, his father's in one of the movies too. He has them in there. I gotta look up which one it is, but his father's the older guy with the big glasses, and they both kind of have big glasses. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is familiar. So Eighth, because he has this criminal background, also to tie in the extended Martin Scorsese universe, the place where the means by which like the mob bosses are funding Ace's casino is the Teamster Pension Fund. Which obviously is the Teamster Pension Fund is a huge part of The Irishman, Scorsese's most recent gangster movie. Darius in the chat says, I think he was Vinny in Goodfellas. Okay.
Yeah. He might have died. Yeah, I'm looking it up. He might have died before Casino, but the father was, so it might have just been Goodfellas that he was in. I thought I spotted him, but I guess he died right before that came out.
All right, fair enough. So because of this, they have the guy who's running the Teamsters Pension Fund, is a connected guy, somebody who, you think until the end is somebody they trust, and still sort of is, and they find this like random, this random guy to be the official chairman of the board. I think they say is like somebody who was like, when they found him, he was like this like small time like real estate hustler, and he was
doing like real estate. He's like some disgraced real estate dealer guy that they kind of just threw in there.
Right, but Ace himself is they give him over the course of the movie a couple of different jobs, because they explain at the beginning you can whereas you have to be like the board has to look at your your license request or whatever to actually have one of these positions running a casino, but there's a 10-year backlog, and you can always just keep on, and you're allowed to actually work in the position while your application is waiting to be looked at. And so
that's it back a little bit whenever you switch like job positions or whatever, like so that they're never really, they're always putting you kind of towards the back of the backlog that they're going through.
Yeah, exactly. So so I think Ace is officially in food and beverage for a lot of it. And then he's
entertainment, which is one of the funniest lines in the movie, because they turn around and they're like, don't give him any job that he can, make a scene. He's got to be quiet. And the next thing you know, it's like Ace Rothstein, entertainment director.
Yeah, for sure. So, which yeah, there's a good line on Chapo a little while back about how if Trump got his own TV show, post presidency, like it would probably look a lot like the Ace Rothstein show.
Well, I've been reading Reaganland, and they're talking about his radio show for a lot of it, and it kind of reminded me of that, almost like an over the top kind of like way for him to speak directly to people. So I think there's a lot of but there really was a Frank Rosenthal show, I guess, if you look it up. And I've never really researched that far into this, but he had like Saturday Night Fever because it was the 70s, and so we had like the videos of everybody like doing disco in the casino, and that was the show.
Yeah. So I guess for the movie they switched the Ace Rothstein show to being like having a little bit more of an old timey kind of Rat Pack vibe.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. So Ace, and then at the beginning of the movie, he's even like resistant to it. He's like, okay, but I have to be given a totally free hand here. Nobody can interfere with how I run it. Which obviously, as you watch that, that they're putting that in there because there is going to be massive interference, in how he runs it later on.
There's also that great line where Joe Pesci says, "Classic Ace." Whenever you try to give him something, he tries to talk you out of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Which is a good, which is a good line. I think you get some sense for like their dynamic as these, as these people who are, friends, since they were kids and have been like entangled with each other's lives for a very long time. And so there's like some real affection there, but like also, like it's also if they didn't go back this long, right? Like Nikki, you get the sense, especially neither of them would be able to stand the other one at all now.
Yeah. Well, it's also like the scene they always have in movies about addiction, where the person's like, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly," I would never touch something like that, and then they're like, "Oh, come on," and then they're tumbling into the world of addiction. Of course, it's the addiction of excess in general, but yeah, it's like that, like, oh, like I shouldn't, like I really shouldn't, be given a huge casino.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's as the in the opening part of the movie, which goes on for a very long time. It's a 3-hour movie, so the end and whatever. I mean, it's wonderfully put together, so it's like incredibly watchable at all points. Like it always feels like it's moving forward very fast. But I think there's probably like an hour of this movie that's just pure setup. That it's a combination of either Ace or Nikki in voiceover. Telling you how the casinos work and about how they ran things there.
Well, that's classic Scorcese, because he always has that huge setup. And I was watching him on Charlie Rose talking about Casino and like just like the movie in general, and he was saying, if you only watch the first 90 minutes of Goodfellas, like you think to yourself like, wow, this is a great lifestyle. And he's like, but you have to the second half of it, and it's kind of the same setup here. That he's showing how amazingly beautiful these casinos are and the excess that you're allowed to have, and then everything comes tumbling down after that. But you have to, he meticulously has to set up every piece of it.
Yeah, well, and since we did say earlier that we are going to spoil the shit out of Casino in the stream, that I should say, like, I think that's a really interesting comparison, because one thing that really hit me in this rewatch was that they do the same thing like in a weird way, right? As much as they are very different, right? That like in a weird way, Goodfellas and Casino are kind of the same movie in the sense that there's like a lot of setup about how whatever sort of crime is going on works. There's a lot of just, oh my god, isn't this fun going on?
Yeah.
And then over the course of the movie, you know, you see everything falling apart. Because people get greedy, because they're like, I mean, in Casino, like they really like spell it out in these terms, that like Vegas has got into them. And also you just see like increasingly, like you see scenes throughout the movies that make you confront like just how much these guys are just horrific sociopaths. But then at the very end, when everything does fall apart, like the thing that makes it not quite like a little morality play is that there's this in both movies at the end, there is this like sense of like, I don't know, wistfulness or something about like how much the normal world sucks and how much more awesome the gangster world was, that like
it's kind of something that they touch on in the Sopranos too, like how close corporations are to mobs in like a weird way, like it's like it's such a funny line at the end of it when he's saying, it'll take you 2 weeks to get room service in the new version of in Vegas. Like everybody used to know your name in all these casinos, and now it's like
they know your name, they know what you drank, all that, right? Yeah, well, and now this corporate version is so impersonal, and like you see, like after an entire movie of seeing this, like very like. Very seedy but like very romanticized and glamorous version of what was going on in the casinos at the end when he's telling you about how the corporations took it over, then like you just see this like sea of like really unappealing looking old people like pouring into the casino. It's like yeah, this is what you get, right? You just get like this sort of like mundane, boring horrible kind of world, the same way. Pause. If you haven't seen Goodfellas, the same way at the end of Goodfellas, you have Henry Hill is in witness protection in Florida, I think, and
the same can of soup or the same can of watery Campbell's tomato soup or whatever every
exactly. So like the note that both movies end on is like kind of disgust and sadness with like the lost glory of having this fun gangster lifestyle, even though the entire movie was spent like showing you how and why everything fell apart for the characters, and also how like evil and cruel the lifestyle was.
Well, the funny part about the end of Casino is he's basically back in the same position he was at the beginning of it. In the end, he's still sitting at that desk counting like sports bets for everybody, and it almost has like a noir feeling. Like at the end of solving like a big mystery, and everybody dies. Like in like those old noir movies, I mean, like they always show like Humphrey Bogart or someone sitting back at the desk as if like nothing's changed. So, but that's why I kind of talk about like meritocracy. Like he had a skill, like his skill was sports betting. In the end, as much as they want to talk about trust and loyalty and he's Jewish, they're talent. Like in the end, his talent, I mean, is kind of what saved him. Like besides, the car that stopped him from exploding. Like,
no, for sure. And there's even kind of a suggestion, I think, just a little bit that that it's not even that bad for him, because he's such a crazily obsessive workaholic. And he's just so like grimly determined to be on top of everything all the time that like that you almost feel like a little bit. It's like, okay, well, his life looks much more glamorous and awesome, earlier during the bulk of the movie than it did at the beginning and the end. But also like, how much worse is it actually for Ace?
Yeah, he's still like hanging out kind of in Vegas. Like he still is counting sports bets. Like he still has the money around him. Like there's nothing, it's like. It's better to have loved and lost, I guess. And in this case, he lost the casino, but he's still kind of back where he started again.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat says like the wine and bread scene at the prison and The Irishman, the sort of downfall into just like mundane, like ordinary mediocre life at the end. Which is for sure, right? Because also Scorsese knows how to do a prison scene that even makes prison look weirdly awesome, from Goodfellas. Hey, you're with your buddies, you're making really good Italian food, like
there was a great meme that I saw the other day that was like, it was like everybody eating in the back of the class, and it's the four of them like cutting up the garlic and everything in the back of the
prison. Fair enough. So early in the movie, you see Ace saying, that he has to have a totally free hand to run his casino however he wants. And the two things that are being set up are, like after you see and you're watching how good he is at running the casino, and how amazing he was even as a sports handicapper, but how good he is at running the casino and doing this thing that's still very much a criminal operation. Like you see them, taking people who are caught cheating into the back room to smash up their hands with hammers.
Yeah, but it's illegal. It's an illegal operation in the Vegas way, and not in like the New York way, where it's straddling the line. Like everybody's looking the other way, but it's still straddling the line between like a legitimate and illegitimate operation.
Yeah, exactly. That this is because nobody in the Vegas power structure is going to get upset because they're because of violence towards like random assholes caught cheating at the casino.
Yeah, they only get upset when you fire their dumb nephew or brother-in-law or something.
Yeah, exactly. Which is something that's set up very early in the movie and then comes up in a big way about halfway point, like where that first VHS cut off, which is that there are people who, even though Ace is, like you said, with the meritocracy point, even though Ace is like competent to the point where he's so on top of it that, in Nicky's, Joe Pesci's voiceover, he says he doesn't even really seem like he's having fun with any of it. Even though he is like all about like making sure every detail is handled at every point. One of the scenes I've always remembered, and actually there's a video I took for Jack when I brought this up, talking about how like sort of because I always think of it when I think about like a certain kind of like right-wing caricature of socialism about making sure that everybody has exactly as much at all times. That scene where he storms back into the kitchen to yell at the chef because there aren't exactly as many blueberries in every muffin. Even though he's obsessive on that level, he has to keep around these people who are the abysmally incompetent fail sons of or fail nephews or whatever of different people who are part of that Las Vegas power structure. So that's like one of like basically three things that comes and bites him in the ass later in the movie. The other two are
that's kind of the main one, which is funny because there's so much other crazy
there's so much higher drama things, but like the main thing that fucks up Vegas for him is that he can't bring himself after one of these whatever fail nephews screws up too badly. There's a which is actually a scene I've showed in classes when we've talked about probability, that where he's yelling at the guy for not understanding that there's no way that three people could have won on that machine right in a row. If there wasn't cheating going on.
Some people gotta win sometimes, and he's like, no, they don't.
Exactly.
The line's really funny where he says either he's incompetent or he's in on it, and either way you can't have him working at a casino, which honestly, as far as firing people goes, is kind of a reasonable,
totally right. I mean, like if anybody should have been fired, it should have been this guy. And even though there are like much more dramatic things that are like way more obvious when you see them coming, that screw things up for him in Vegas as the movie goes on. That one, like you said, that's actually kind of like the big hinge one, I mean, for what it's worth, I think the big mistake he makes there, and this does fit with the way the other two things are set up, is that in each case it's like that. It's like that tragic flaw thing, right? Like the main character in a Greek tragedy who has like something that's like supposed like really obvious from the beginning.
Yeah.
That they're part of it is about watching them sort of walk into the fire. They could have avoided, and it's a very similar thing here, because in all three cases, right? So there's the firing the guy who's politically connected. There's Nikki, right? Joe Pesci's character, who, as he comes in, right, that like you can sort of see it from the beginning that like since they establish right away that Nikki is crazy, that that like you see him, I think, killing the guy, because Ace asked him if like a fountain pen on the bar was his.
Yeah, he stabs him with the pen. Yeah, I assume that guy.
Yeah. He stabs him like in the neck though, right? So like I think he
stabs him, I think, in the neck and then in the chest. But yeah, he stabs him enough times that there's no way.
Yeah, so because they're sitting around the bar and Ace asks, "Oh, is this your pen?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, it's my pen. What is it?" And he said, "Well, I mean, you just left it here." And you're like, it's like this very low key thing, and the guy's like irritated by it. It's like, "Oh, shove it up your ass." And then Nikki responds by stabbing him, right? So from the beginning that Nikki's crazy. He doesn't have any impulse control, and so he's going to badly fuck things up for Ace. And so there's a point where early on in the movie, when Nikki says, "Hey, what would you think about me coming out there?" And you could see the like warning lights going off, right? Like if this happens, it's going to be terrible for you. But Ace doesn't know how to say no. And then the last one, of course, is his relationship with his wife, which is the one where it's like the most like.
Oh, that's just red flag after red flag after red flag.
Yeah, it's like nothing but a long series of red flags, like that from the beginning, right? It's almost like watching Uncut Gems and seeing like Adam Sandler make another bet and another bet and another bet.
Yeah.
Like that everything with Ginger, Sharon Stone's character throughout the movie, like all along. There are so many both objective warnings and times when she warns him, right? It's like, look, I don't think I can do this. But he insists on, pursuing this relationship with her and marrying her and having kids with her, despite all of her.
Some of that, I think, is also the fact that, as a Jewish person with mob connections, he knows that he's never going to be within their circle of trust. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he knows he's not, a paisan. Like, he's his own. So he's so desperate to find somebody that he can trust in those situations because he knows that, if money was involved with it, it would never be them trying to save him.
Right.
So, he's so desperate to find somebody that he can trust himself that he completely picks the wrong person because that's kind of just who's there.
Yeah, and he insists. I mean, like there's so many times, like so like there's a point where he puts a bunch of money in a vault as his shakedown and kidnapping money.
Yeah,
and he gives her the only key to it, and then
that's going to come back to bite him in the ass too because even the banker's like, are you sure you want to do this?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, all right, like I'm just making sure, like nobody else will do this. And he's like, no, like you got to trust your wife. And he's like, but do you? Yeah.
Right. Even though, again, she has given him every possible sign that you can't trust her. And by the way, I'd say to the person in the chat, that none of these people are lumpen proletarian. I think there's several steps beyond that. They're actually fairly wealthy gangsters for most of the movie.
That's like one of the big, class distinctions between Goodfellas and Casino. Like, in Casino, they're definitely a few steps above what everyone in Goodfellas was was attempting to. Well, they are kind of what everyone in Goodfellas eventually saw themselves attempting to be. You know what I mean? Like they're the higher up. They're the higher up people in the with mob connections rather than like kind of just a friend of a friend of a friend.
No, that's right. Like, did you see Mean Streets?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like in terms of both Scorsese and non-Scorsese gangster movies. As far as Scorsese gangster movies, like, Mean Streets is the one where it's like the lowest level gangsters. They're like,
they're just the people that show up to beat the fuck out of somebody. Like if, if they need extra recruits.
Yeah, they're like way down at the bottom of the pole. Like, sometimes you'll have, sometimes crooked cops will shake them down.
Yeah.
And then when you get up to Goodfellas, it's like mafia middle management, and then here, like Ace and Nicky in their own ways are really running the city.
Yeah, they're running a city. They're not running like one of the big mob cities, but they're running a city.
yeah, that's true. That's a good distinction. It's not like they're it's not like they're on like the level of like the Five Families in New York or something. But they're running Vegas, and in Ace's case, by just being very, very good at running like a slightly illegal casino operation, and in Nicky's case, by actually coming in and being and being like a conventional mob boss. That when because he has no impulse control, right? Like which at one point in the movie he explicitly says in dialogue, look, I'm stupid. I'm just gonna keep coming back.
Yeah. There's that classic line, it's like if you beat him down, you better come back with a knife, and then he's gonna come back with a gun, and then if you shoot him with a gun, you better kill him.
Yeah,
he's just gonna keep coming back on you.
Exactly. Like Thomas in chat says, Mean Streets is just Scorsese's youth. Gangsters are involved as a fact of life for his neighborhood. I think that's right. And he also points out that the Ginger, Sharon Stone, is extremely explicit with him in terms of her expectations and feelings. She says, like at various points, she's like, "Look, marrying me is not a good idea. We're not going to be happy.
I don't love you.
I don't love you." She says that explicitly,
and he's like, "See, that's the biggest red flag." Like he's sitting there, he's like, "Well, that'll grow." And it's like, will it though? Like,
and he has this level of trust that, like, I'm going to sign over, here's this like $2 million in a bank that only you can access and all this stuff. This level of trust that somehow paired with, maybe love will grow in time. And then similarly for the you've said that. You've said that, mindfulness. We got it. So similarly, I think that for the subplot with the guy, the fail nephew that he fires, I think the point, right? Like, so they tell you right early on in the movie, right? Like during that first hour of setup, they say, look, there are some of these guys that aren't good at their jobs, but you cannot fire them because of who they're connected to. And then, granted, it's not his first strike, and it's a really, really bad strike. But guys certainly deserve to be fired. But he does fire he does fire.
And I don't say anyone deserves to get fired easily. I'm our leftist that they're
but like if we had what we should have, and every workplace was unionized, and there were labor laws that made it hard to fire people, or even like. Whatever sort of private sector there still was dominated by worker co-ops. And so you had some kind of like progressive discipline procedure. No matter how you fill out that story, if we still had casino in this world, this guy would definitely lose his job. He's clearly not good at his job, which the guy on the gaming commission explicitly says in dialogue. He's like, I don't even remember the guy's name. He's useless, right? Like I know that. but he's my nephew, brother-in-law, whatever he is, right? So
he gives him a life raft. He says, "Is there
yeah,
anything
I was gonna say.
further down the trough that?" So he kind of hands him like the rope to be like, you know what, like I know you've hung yourself with this rope. Like here's the way to like. Could he even work in like the kitchen? I'm assuming, you know what I mean. It's like
well, that's the thing, because they had to throw that in to make it really clear that all of these are self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah.
That he, the one that would have been hardest for him to do anything about was Nikki moving in, but like he could have tried and he didn't try, right? Like instead he just sort of said, well, move in, but like be on your best behavior. It's like, yeah, come on, that's not going to happen. And then of course the one he had the most control over was Ginger, because she was like, no, dude, this is not a good idea. You shouldn't marry me. And then in between is the gaming commissioner, because like you said, he gives him that out, right? He says, look, I understand that the guy can't be the person who's in charge of these machines if he's that stupid and or in on it. But you can give him some kind of job. And the fact that he couldn't give him, exactly. Thomas says in the chat, some sort of like Trump son kind of job where he doesn't actually have to exercise authority, but like he has some meaningless title. Like the fact that you couldn't do that, like that's where he's really like signing his own death warrant there. As far as like what he's been trying to, to keep up appearances, sort of keep everybody happy. So, and
the irony is also that he's given himself a meaningless job title, and you know what I mean, like, based on like how good he is at running a casino, but like it's not like he's never thought of that.
No, clearly, right? Like that seems like something he could totally do. It's just that at this point, which we established in a different way around the same time, that he that because there's Phil Green, I want to say, is the front man.
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah, Phil Green is that because Phil Green is he's getting into trouble of his own, because he has this old like business partner for when he was like a small-time real estate hustler who shows up and wants a cut, and when he rebuffs her, she wants to, she's like suing him to open the books, which would obviously be a disaster. So Nikki kills her, but because they wanted to attract attention for that and reassure everybody that there's a stable hand on the tiller, then she Ace does this interview with the media, which is like a crazy thing to do in the first place. Like, why would he give interviews if the whole idea is that because of his criminal background, he can't be approved for this? So he just has to have, there just has to be some sort of like, okay, informally, everybody knows he's running it, but he's not going to call attention to itself. And he gives this interview and he says, and, granted, the reporter sort of traps him into saying it, but also so much of the movie is about how smart he is. Like, he could have not said this, I am the boss, right? Which, of course, you must know is going to be the headline.
She says, are you the one running things? And he kind of backs off and he's like, well, he, because, it's that balancing act of trying to distance himself from Phil Green, which is something that definitely has to happen, but also trying to, the hubris of him wanting to admit that he runs things, which is his undoing, obviously, part of it. So
yeah, exactly. And some part of him does want to go on record because he's so proud of himself, that he's been doing such an awesome job running the casino that, the power has gotten to him. I mean, like that's also kind of why he's going back into the kitchen to yell at the chef about the number of blueberries in every muffin,
the power has gone to his head in a very different way than it's gone to Nikki's head, which is kind of like these parallels throughout the movie with him and Nikki that aren't necessarily like abundantly clear, but kind of are.
Yeah, totally. And so, power goes to Nikki's head in a more traditional mob boss way, because after he's banned from the casinos, they put him in the black book, which he says at one point when of course, like everything else that's bad that happens in this movie, like there's always a warning beforehand. So Ace says, hey, you better be careful. They're going to put you in that black book. And he's like, oh, whatever, this black book. You know, there are only 2 names in that thing, and one of them's still Al Capone. And of course, if your name is in a book where there are 2 names and one of them is Al Capone, then obviously, like, you know,
definitely don't want to be in that book if you're trying to keep a low profile.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing as saying, like, I am the boss. Like he wants to be put in the same list as Al Capone. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly, yeah.
At least to an implied level, like.
Totally, right? Like on some level, he wants that. So so the power goes to Nicky's head in this sort of traditional mob boss way. That after he gets kicked it, he's no longer allowed to set foot in the casinos. Then he just starts doing the kind of like traditional mob stuff that was never done in Vegas because the actual mob never wanted to fuck their Vegas operation by having street crime in any kind of like big, violent, organized way. And so he starts doing street crime in Vegas in a big, violent, organized way. That's how it goes to his head. In Ace's case, what he wants is the one thing he can't have, which is like mainstream legitimacy. That he wants to he wants to be somebody who is given this recognition in the respectable world, which he does already have to a certain extent. I mean, you know, he goes in there and like politicians like come into his casino and they schmooze with him. He has like he's given an award at one point in the movie. Like he has it to a certain extent, but he wants more of it. And of course, he's never going to get as much as he wants because he does have this long rap sheet as this like mafia linked sports handicapper and illegal bookie from back home.
And everybody knows that he's childhood friends with Nicky Santoro. Like, you know what I mean? Like they haven't kept that a secret like throughout
Yeah, exactly. So he can't get it, but he still wants it. And so he thinks, look, he should be able to do what anybody who didn't have these mafia connections in this past would be able to do, which is just like, say screw you to these Vegas power brokers and, fire, and fire the fail nephew and, talk openly to the media, about how he's running things. And that really ends up biting him in the ass in this scene, which is, I want to just show here for everybody. You texted this to me just before we started, and I had no idea, right? Like I knew that some of this was based on, real things that had happened. They mentioned,
it's based on a literal real scene that happened.
Yeah. So here's the real scene.
It provoked a stormy confrontation between Rosenthal and then Gaming Commission Chairman Harry Reid. An enraged Rosenthal accused Reid of double-crossing him after asking for favors from Rosenthal in the past. It was a confrontation that would earn Rosenthal the underworld nickname of Crazy, and it illustrated the arrogance that the Chicago mob boys displayed in what they viewed as their town, Las Vegas.
This was predictable. They would not even allow me a hearing. No inconsistency. When the chairman had told us that he would give us 10 days, whatever time we needed, until George Swartz spoke up in the kangaroo court. And today he pounded his gavel in accordance with his commissioners. I call him a hypocrite and the fellow members of this commission to deny me a fair hearing.
I'd like to answer that while we're here. Mr. Rosenthal is being very typical to this point. He's lying. The only time I've ever been in the Stardust Hotel was with Brian Greenspun long prior to my getting on the commission. And in fact, I rode in the same car with Mr. Brian Greenspun.
And had lunch with me in the Stardust Hotel and Brian Greenspun. Is that a lie too?
Well, Brian Greenspun and I ate in the Stardust Hotel.
With Frank Rosenthal at the table.
You were wandering around.
Thank you.
Sure.
Right.
But that's the only time I've ever met with Mr. Rosenthal, and his statement relative to this being a year ago is certainly untrue. And
Mr. Reid, does this contradict the statement you made earlier about allowing as much time as was necessary?
Yeah, and I made the statement on the record. I think Mr. Goodman, on behalf of his client, should have been able to put on more evidence. But
and he voted against it.
And I conducted meetings.
The chairman called me a liar. Asked the chairman if he had Jay Brown call me on behalf of him to prevent the Bob List story. Ask him if I'm lying now.
Respond to that.
Did he call my office and speak to Jay Brown? Am I lying again?
I've stated to a number of people here in the press already that I contacted Jay Brown
To seek my influence.
about 7 days prior to the election because I felt it was comparable for the state of Nevada for a story like that to break. I had been given the assurance that Mr. List and Mr. Rose also did not want the story to run, and I felt that it best served the state of Nevada, and I think time will prove that to be the case.
Mr. Chairman, did you ask me, I'm asking you in a public forum here, did you ask me through Jay Brown to assist you in stopping the story that's now
The
appeared?
answer is yes.
Thank you very much for not calling me a liar.
It's pretty exact. It's like pretty exact to the scene that Scorcese.
There are like several the equivalent scene, and by the way, it makes it so much funnier that like the version that like the cowboy game commissioner in Casino is based on Harry Reid. That's amazing. You know, that like that this sort of, you know, person who became this big prominent centrist Democrat and, you know, helped to beat back Bernie in Nevada, you know, in 2000.
He's the one that they brought out every single time to shiv Bernie because they were friends. You know, or they were close. So yeah, it's kind of funny to see him backed into a corner like that. It's
and there were the equivalent scene in Casino. I mean, it's actually amazing watching that, like how exact it is. Like there are several lines of dialogue that are just lifted straight from the real exchange. You know, well, you know, were you at the, you know, did you have lunch with it? Well, you were wandering around. You know, okay, but was I there? Okay, you were there. You know,
including the name Brian Greenspan.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is that's hilarious. To be clear, somebody in the chat I think was confused about this. So Harry Rosenthal is the person who's the ace, the real life Ace Rothstein. Harry Reid is the one who's the real life version of the Vegas Gaming Commission guy who Rothstein pisses off and who denies his application halfway through the movie. So as a result of all these things, you know, beforehand, like at the beginning of the movie, I like Mr. Antonio in chat says Bernie should have smoked a cigarette in Harry Reid's face too.
Calling me a liar.
yeah, exactly. I can just imagine that. But you know, same energy as Bernie's interview with the New York Times, you know, when they were making their endorsement decision. Yeah.
Rosenstein is not going to call you on your birthday. He's just not.
Exactly.
It's not the guy he is.
Exactly. Yeah. Except for, of course, Ace Rothstein probably would call you on your birthday, but he probably has.
He's in it for the schmoozing.
Yeah. Exactly. Like he's actually really good at the schmoozing, which again is part of the problem, right? Like that these people, you know, like Harry Reid would have lunch with him, but like it just bothers him in a way. It's almost like Trumpian. Like what bothers Ace is that even though he's getting all this access and all this power, that he's not getting the recognition of it on that like media level of just being able to be completely open about it. You know, the same way you get the sense sometimes with Trump that his like, you know, that if he were offered a deal, you know, where it's like, okay, you don't get to be president, but we'll write a like really glowing article about you in the New York Times and like invite you to some parties, he'd probably take it.
I always thought Trump's price would be like an MSNBC show. It's like, you know what I mean? Like I always thought you could probably just bribe him with saying like, you know, you can talk to people on like MSNBC, like, and we're not gonna block it out. Like you can have an hour a day. Which is apparently,
especially if it was the Morning Joe slot, so he could have the vengeance of taking away the jobs of some former friends, you know, who he fell out with. Like
which
that
is
would,
also apparently Ace Rosenstein's price because he's given the show, and that's kind of what he wants to the whole time.
Yeah. So he does this super cheesy show where he threatens the Harry Reid, where he on the show he challenges the Harry Reid character to debate him,
Yeah.
which is amazing. But also I want to, so because of this, so Ace is fucking up. Ace is way more in the spotlight than he's supposed to be. The whole idea is that he's supposed to just run things quietly so the money comes into the mob bosses in Kansas City. Nicky is fucking things up because he's actually doing this like flashy, super violent, super obvious street crime in Vegas, which again, the mob never did because they never wanted to shit where they eat. And so he is shitting where they eat. And he is.
I love the line where he says, "If you had any heart, you'd be stealing for a living." He says,
yeah, which is very similar actually to one of the Henry Hill's voiceover lines of Goodfellas, about how like anybody who didn't live like this is just a sucker. Which, no, totally.
By the way, Biden points to, or Democratic diversity points to the actual Frank Rosenthal. One of the things that he did at the Stardust was he hired half the blackjack dealers had to be women, which nobody had ever done before. And the so he actually, he created diversity on the staff of a major casino. So
fair enough. Yeah. So yeah, the so Nicky. So the way that Nicky is fucking it up is by alienating, like, at the beginning of the movie, all the cops in Vegas are being paid off. The cops and the mafia are getting along. Everything's going really well for these guys. But of course, because Nicky is doing all this super violent, super flashy street crime, he screws that up. And then Ace's marriage to Ginger was, well, okay. I mean, it was always obvious what it was going to be, but also
apparently not to him.
Yeah, not to him, right? Like obvious to any possible observer, but not to him. And the particular way that thread unspools has to do with a huge element and a very funny element of this movie that we haven't talked about at all. And I want to make sure we get to this, which is the James Woods character.
Yeah. Who is what I assume James Woods in real life is like.
Yeah, that really feels like James Woods playing himself. So
like a greasy pimp.
Like not a like not a pimp in any way that would have any sort of like any sort of the more like positive connotations, what anybody would say.
The romantic connotations, I guess.
So
he's literally just the grimiest kind of like failed street pimp. Yeah,
exactly. So he there are a couple of times when he like goes through this like litany of all the things that the James Wood character is, which so it's like a card shark, a country club hustler. So he just establishes the James Wood character is the lowest of the low, but because he was Ginger's pimp when she was a sex worker,
whatever, like a high school sweetheart or childhood sweetheart or something, like the first, like the man she truly is in love with, which
like this is the probably the only human being in the movie that she actually loves in any way. We establish very much that her daughter is not on that list. So like the only person that she really loves is her old like pimp boyfriend Lester James Woods. Lester Diamond, which is a great name.
Honestly, a great pimp name. Like I wish for the fact that like Lester Diamond is an amazing pimp name.
Yeah, I like somebody in the chat says, I believe that James Woods thinks he's the good guy in every movie. It's like, what? This guy seems cool.
He's a down on his luck. He's a guy trying to make it. He's down on his luck. Everyone keeps beating him up. He doesn't know why, but
Yeah. So because, oh God, yeah, we were talking about the series of red flags earlier, right? You know, one of the biggest and reddest is when they on their wedding night, Ace finds Ginger crying on the phone to Lester. And he's like, "Oh, well, this is fine. I'll just tell her to stop caring about him, and that'll be fine." You know, like I'll just instruct her.
He like gives her like a little pep talk. It's like, hey, you know, you're over this, right? Like you and me, we're married. Like she's like, yeah, you know, you just gave me a lot of money, so sure. And he's like, yeah, you know, you love money, I love money. I don't see what's not working here for us.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong? And then so Lester calls up Ginger, says that he needs money. So she takes because because he won't give her $25,000 without her saying what it's for. She ends up taking it, from the bank, and then he has Nikki follow her, catch her, and then has Nikki's guys. Crucially, Ginger doesn't see Nikki at any point in this, but Nikki's guys beat the shit out of Lester while she watches, which is really what turns her against Ace. What goes from she's very clear that she never loved Ace. She says so explicitly, but that's really where she starts to hate him, and because of that, and also her becoming much more of an alcoholic and an addict over the course of the movie, because she's just, and it's hinted that there was always some of that, like even in the wedding night scene, he's like, oh, you really shouldn't drink so much, but again, apparently he doesn't think anything of this. And then well,
even before that, when we first meet her, they say she can keep a guy up for days. Like she has like, you know what I mean? She has like the whole vial of coke that she has and the old guy in the like hotel room, which seems kind of dangerous. Like, I don't know. I mean, I would assume that some of them have died of heart attacks up in the.
Yeah, right. well, we established that she's paid off all the doormen and valet drivers. Yeah. So maybe she got the bodies disposed of, but
she's generous with other people's money. I mean, she pays off handsomely for their.
yeah, exactly. But he thinks, Ace thinks that well, I told her to stop drinking so much. I told her to stop caring about Lester. I don't see why this isn't always all going well. And then all of the strands of this end up coming together during the last part of the movie, because Nikki, who's much more dangerous and out there because he was kicked out of the casinos, ends up hooking up with Ginger, which again, this is the whole thing. The whole movie is this incredibly slow motion train wreck. And that's like a big part of it. You could always see it coming in this movie. And
the first time they're meeting, she starts kissing him, and like he's there's that beautiful transition where he's kind of pushing her off, but not really, and she keeps kissing him. And then you see the sign behind De Niro that says yes in small letters, and then no in big letters.
yeah, exactly. So it's obvious from pretty early in the movie what's going to happen there. That she's going to turn to Nikki as the one person who could be her ally and protect her here, who's potentially more powerful or at least more dangerous than Ace, and of course Nikki has no impulse control, as you established throughout the movie, so of course he's going to go for it. I'm proud of
the guy for only going for it, for waiting that long.
Yeah, well, it's a sign of. Actually, I mean, it's a sign of how how deep this friendship goes. Because I think self-preservation wouldn't have done it. Yeah, exactly right. Samir says in the chat, for a guy that runs a casino, Sam is really bad at doing anything but take people at face value. Which is true. I mean, that's like a big aspect of this movie that when it comes to this one narrow little area of life, gambling, he's incredibly good at like seeing what people are up to and being very suspicious of them, and figuring out all the tricks that people use. But whatever. This is not subtle. But then when it comes to like any kind of interpersonal interaction that's not about gambling, then he just pretty much assumes that people are on the level.
He's just desperately looking for people he can trust. Like he's somebody thrown in a position where he can't trust anyone. Like who believes that the only way that he's going to be able to get himself out of situations is by finding like a small family and friends unit that he can trust. I mean, he picks the absolute worst person, but that is. I mean, it's understandable that is his motivation within it. He's kind of trying to force something that
Yeah. And even his relationship with Nikki, really, like he go like there's a scene where they go out in the desert, right? A big thing throughout this movie they talk about is the holes in the desert. They set that up a bunch of times. One of the funniest lines in Nikki's voiceover is when he says that it's really important that you dig the hole before you show up with the body, because otherwise, you'd be out there for half an hour, 45 minutes. Who knows who could come by?
Digging a few more holes.
Yeah, you end up having to dig a few more holes. Then you're there all night. So they also do these. They also keep on doing these meetings out in the desert. So, which again, everything in this movie that's bad that happens, you see it coming from several miles away. Like they make sure you can see it, because that's part of the tragic effect. That look at this crash that's about to happen. Here are all the ways you could avoid it. Nobody's going to avoid it. And so they set up right at the beginning of the movie the holes in the desert. They set up very early in the movie that they're always doing these meetings out in the desert, and where it'd be very easy to kill and bury you.
They kind of give you a little bit of a almost like a like a switch up when they say, like a red herring, when they say that even the cops aren't afraid to dig a hole in the desert, because you assume that maybe later in the movie that's going to come back, and it's just the holes in the desert that come back. That doesn't really.
Yeah, no, the cops thing really doesn't. But then there's like a scene where Ace and Nikki have a meeting out in the desert, and in Ace's voiceover, he says normally there's a 99% chance that I'd come back alive from any meeting with Nikki. By the way, awesome. It's one of his best friends in the world. It's only 99%.
Well, it's not that for anybody else. You know what I mean? Like it's just him. Like he's the only one that has that 99%.
Yeah, exactly. Like probably the next best person's like 80%. But then he says this time it was 50-50, and I was watching that, I was thinking, then why the fuck did you drive out there, right? Like, like if you think there's only a 50-50 chance that you're going to survive, but it seems like a little bit of that same thing, that because Nikki is the mob guy he's most connected to, and is part of that like intimate family and friends group, even though he knows that it's stupid, he's still going to trust Nikki certainly much more than he should, and which is the same as his relationship with Ginger, and then of course at the end of the movie, Chekhov's gun goes off, although in a really funny way, because everything else in this movie, they warn you 20 times before it happens, what's going to happen. So you see it coming. That makes it more agonizing to watch, except that, again, stop it if you haven't seen the movie, except that that Nikki is killed at the end of the movie. That, in fact, that at the beginning, they show you what looks like Ace being killed, sort of. But then that turns out to be, the car bombing that he survived it. He said it was amateur night. It's
the plate, which is another true story about Frank Rosenthal. The actual guy was almost killed by a plate going off in his.
So there's a plate under his seat, which is what saved him in the car bombing.
And the bomb doesn't go through the plate, and that actually apparently was a true story from the guy's life, because he later turned into an FBI informant and like wrote all these books and did all these interviews about like his life, and that was like a real part of it.
Yeah. Wow. So they show you at the beginning what looks like Ace being killed, although even in the first scene, you can sort of see that, like, you know, that he's not blowing up in it. It's a little confusing what's happening. But then Nikki being killed is the one thing in this movie that they don't show you is going to happen before it happens. I mean, like, in a sense they do, because you go out, you know, like he goes out there and it's one of these super avoidable things. Originally, they just wanted to meet with his brother and they were going to do it in the city. But because there's so much heat, he insisted on doing it in the desert and that he would come along. So he's like really delivering himself up to the mob bosses after they've been going on this tear of killing everybody who knew anything that could potentially turn state's witness, even like really trusted people like Andy Stone, who runs the Teamsters Pension Fund. So it's this profoundly stupid thing that Nikki's doing going to this meeting, but still they do this trick because it's the one time they actually do something for shock value in the movie, that he's like pattering away, you know, giving his voiceover, and then the voiceover cuts off mid-sentence when they hit him
which makes me wonder about like the omnipresent narration, because, you know, he's telling the story obviously like after the story's already happened, but then he kind of gets hit in the middle of narration. So was he telling the story in his head from that? Like, is he telling the whole story in the car ride on the way over? Or
I guess, right? It's like that, what's that? William Faulkner. Wow, I just said William F. Faulkner because I have William F. Buckley on my mind. For that thing. That Faulkner story. The What's It Creek? With the guy being hanged, and then it turns out like it's all going through his head, and the you know, like minute after he's hanged, you know, it's like, so maybe it's like that, you know, that like somehow, yeah, it's in the car or something. I'm not quite sure, but yeah. So then the movie again, it wraps up like Goodfellas did on multiple levels. That you have the fall from grace of these gangsters, that you have showing how like unappetizing the mundane world is, that, you know, that's sort of reasserting itself, you know, from the gangsters getting to get away with this for so long. And
even Sharon Stone's death is mundane. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's anticlimactic that she just kind of ODs. Like, they don't really make it clear whether or not the mob kind of provided her with the hot shot. I'd assume they don't, and she just kind of ODs on her own.
Yeah, I thought the implication there was that maybe these guys that she was hanging out with at the end did that. That for some reason maybe they just wanted that like those last however much they said she had left, like 5,000 gold coins or something.
Yeah.
You know, but it could have been the mob. Paying them to do that, passing her the hot dose so that she couldn't testify, although she'd already kind of passed up the opportunity to testify. But yeah, actually, I'm glad Cult of Lenny brings up in the chat the House of the Rising Sun, which was perfect for the ending. And in general, that's something that like I really on this rewatch, you know, since even though, like I said, I don't think like every line in this movie I was like, oh yeah, remember that, right? You know, like I think that was one of the things I was appreciating most in the rewatch, just how perfect the soundtrack was.
Yeah, they have Whip It too as they're walking through in slow motion through like towards the end of it. And no, Scorcese is amazing with what songs that he picks for different stuff, and it's always something you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like, it's a lot of the times it's like either classic rock or it's something that's dating the movie to when it's supposed to be. Like, I don't know. I've always appreciated that a lot as like a Scorsese fan.
Yeah, there's a lot of classic rock. I mean, he's a huge like I mean, Scorsese is clearly a huge classic rock fan. I think he wasn't he at least a producer or something for that HBO show Vinyl. I'm trying to remember what his role was in that show, but he also. So. Oh, what's that?
I said I think so. I think I remember. Yeah. He also I think at one point he did like a Bob Dylan documentary or something. There's
Yeah, that sounds right. And I know he also did a documentary on the Rolling Stones album "Exile on Main Street." I remember watching that like 10 years ago or something. But yeah, so he's clearly a huge classic rock fan, and a lot of that comes out of the soundtrack. A lot of it's also supposed to be period specific. There's also some blues in there. So I mean, like it's just a lot of Stones in that movie. Which is like it's not just okay, he's a huge Stones fan, so there's a lot of Stones in the soundtrack, but it's really perfect for what he's doing, right? Because I think out of all the sort of big classic rock bands, the Rolling Stones are the ones that are most like, it's that, sort of like lean hardest into this sort of up-tempo music about romanticizing seediness, which is a lot of what's going on in the movie. Clapton's in there. Okay. Samir says he directed the first episode of Vinyl, so I guess that's a thing he does, because I remember he also directed the first episode of Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah, and then he was the executive producer on that for the rest of the, which is funny because he didn't want anything to do with The Sopranos at all. It seemed like, you know what I mean, and then Boardwalk Empire was kind of a lot of the same.
So I don't know this. I mean, did they try to get him to do something with The Sopranos?
From what I've seen about it, he didn't seem to have any interest in it. You know what I mean? Like, and then somehow they got him involved in Boardwalk Empire, which obviously is one of the writers from The Sopranos.
Yeah, and of course, it's always fun when you watch these movies to get the that of course there are multiple Goodfellas characters who the actors who play them are in The Sopranos, and there's at least one with Casino.
There's a few. There's at one point you see Steve Sherpa, who's in the bar when Joe Pesci turns around, he stabs Steve Sherpa's friend with the pen a bunch of times.
Okay.
You can see him kind of. Yeah. So I noticed that this time, and then I went back to be like, is that? And then I guess he had talked about it recently on his Sopranos podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's him, and then of course there's Beansy, who's in every single
that's true.
And then there's one guy. There's one guy that but like just as the smaller ones. There's one guy that was good friends with Johnny Sack that like plays a similar background role, because somebody looked really familiar, and I was like, can I place that? But of course then there's Frank Vincent Leotardo, which this movie is kind of like almost like a revenge fantasy for him, I think, because in every other movie with Joe Pesci either beats the shit out of him, or like something happens that he ends up on the ground, and this is the first movie I feel like that he gets the best of Joe Pesci. It's like the long coming revenge of Frank Vincent.
Yeah, totally. Also, like somebody in the chat points out, they like the thing at the end when Ace's glasses look enormous to make him look older, which is actually like good, because I think this is a recurrent problem in Scorsese movies, because he likes to do this Goodfellas, The Irishman is the most extreme example, where these like these crime epics that like go across like decades of people's lives, but then it's like, okay, but they're going to be played by the same actor throughout at least the entire time they're an adult. So what are you going to do there? And in like in The Irishman, which I liked a lot, but like in The Irishman, like that was the one where it was like the most awkward, because they were trying to sort of do a technological workaround to make.
Yeah, they did the CGI aging of Joe Pesci, which did not look good.
Yeah, not at all. But in this one, so it's like I wish he would just stick to like relatively understated things, like just doing the huge sunglasses.
Yeah. Well, there's the almost technologically attracted people that were like hailing The Irishman for that, and then you actually watch it, it's like that's not a good version of that.
No.
Like, just because you do something impressively technologically does not mean it's going to end up looking like And Joe Pesci is old now, like, you know what I mean, or older, like to the point where like you could have done something more understated.
But in any case, hey, this was a lot of fun. When do you want to do the next one? Let me think about this. So today is the 3rd. So let's see. So got something else planned for next Thursday, but if you want to come back this early to do another one, we could do like Thursday the 17th.
Okay. What do you want to do for that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So even though we didn't start with it because we wanted to put some distance with the Mike Racine thing,
Goodfellas next time.
Yeah, I'm kind of tempted to do Goodfellas. Like that seems like such an obvious follow up after Casino. But if you want to do one of the others, I'm open to that.
No, we could do Goodfellas. I feel like that'll get like a lot more people to watch than doing like what I mean. Like
yeah.
I feel like you got to start.
Yeah, right. Because sort of want to do Mean Streets or something. But yeah, let's start with the let's start with the hits. So let's do let's do Goodfellas on the 17th. And I'll see you then. Really enjoyed it.
This is a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, Forrest.
Yep.